Eggs are flying off the shelves. Prices are going up faster than your blood pressure after your cow kicks over the milk bucket. Welcome to the Eggpocalypse. What are you doing? People have already heard about this too much on the news. Rather than going over it again and furthering the fear, why don't you give them a solution? Okay, good idea. I thought so too. So why don't you leave me to it? Okay, go make me a latte, and this time, actually bring me a latte. Last time I never even got one. Okay, I'll get right on that. All right. Because we're more than farmers. And I do have some solutions. I know that some of you watching don't have chickens yet, but you're thinking about it. And then some of you already do have chickens, but you're wanting more eggs. And I have something to say to both of you. There's a few things to think about before you get chickens, several things that you need to do to get the most eggs possible, and a few things to make your life a whole lot easier in caring for these birds. First of all, if you're used to buying really cheap eggs at the store, most likely having your own chickens isn't actually going to save you money, even with the current prices, because feed prices are going up. But if you're buying organic pastured eggs, you can save money having your own chickens if you keep it simple. And anyways, to us, it's more about sustainability and resiliency when the food system is going off the rails. Now, I know all the pretty chickens are fun, and if that's what you want, then go for it. But if you really want a lot of eggs, you're gonna need to get something that is actually a really good egg layer. Duh. So for us, we do eggs as a small side business, and we get hybrid chickens. It's nothing like GMO or anything like that. It's just a cross between a couple breeds of chickens, and they lay really, really well. And if you want a lot of eggs, that's what I would recommend. If you want to stick with something heritage breed, I would recommend something like Rhode Island Reds or Barred Rocks. The main thing to have your chickens lay the most eggs possible is the least stress possible. And that affects your feeding, your housing, and everything. So let's talk about that stuff real quick. So for their housing, it can be kept really simple, but there are a few key elements. Basically, you're wanting to keep them dry, out of the wind, and keep them safe from predators. So this is a hoop house, and it's a hoop house that I actually made. All it is some posts in the ground and some 2x4 rafters with plastic over the top. It really can be that simple. Some people I've seen even buy like a cheap greenhouse on Amazon. You do have to have something that's predator proof. So like down at the bottom of my hoop house, there's boards going along the bottom, and then it's chicken wire up from there with the plastic over the top. So I wouldn't want to rely just on the plastic. I would want some chicken wire or something on the inside, but it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to look amazing. It doesn't have to look like Country Woman magazine or something like that. Now, the reason that I go with a hoop house is because it's a cheap way to do it, cheap way to give them a lot of space, and it lets in sunlight. Natural sunlight is really, really good for them. Now, I did find when I first did this, I put clear plastic on the top. Too much intense sunlight was coming in, and that actually was a bad effect on their egg laying. So now I have like a semi-opaque white plastic on it, and that works great. The other thing with housing is that they have plenty of space. You need at least 3 square feet per bird in a fixed coop like this. And you want a clean, dry floor. And that's why I brought this bale of hay in here. I'm gonna spread some more out here. It's starting to get a little nasty. And what I mean by a clean, dry floor is not necessarily that you have to keep mucking it out all winter long. You don't have to do that. I think the best way to keep a hoop house is deep bedding, and that is basically as there gets to be manure on top, that you're covering it with another layer of carbon. That could be hay, straw, wood chips, leaves. There's a lot of different options that you should be able to get your hands on, at least one of those, and just layer that over the winter, and that'll keep it nice and dry. It'll actually help give them a little bit of warmth because it's composting over the winter, and it's a great start for your compost pile then to put on your garden. Now, you who don't have chickens yet, I'm talking to you because these are things you need to know. But also those of you who already have chickens, I'm talking to you too, because these are ways that you're gonna get the most eggs possible. So with the housing, you want it to be vented, but not drafty. And what that means is, here, let me show you, is that you want there to be airflow going through here, but not down by the floor where they are. You don't want the breeze going over them all the time. If you've got one like a wooden built coop, you would put a vent up by the roof or something, but since this is like this, I've got curtains that open, but they only open from there up. Then at night, when they're up on their perches, I have that down so it's not blowing on them while they're trying to sleep. One thing that is super important is that they have clean water. And the best way to do that is to get it up off of the ground. You want them to have clean, fresh water every day. 2 things about the chickens that you have. If you want lots of eggs, you're gonna have to have younger chickens. They don't start laying till they're about 6 months old, and then you don't wanna keep them for longer than 2 years after that. Now for us, we only keep them laying for a year, and then we sell them and we get new chickens. Since we sell eggs at a store, we need to keep their shell quality good, and we need to keep their lay rate a lot more consistent because the store is relying on us to keep them stocked. After the first laying season, they're just gonna keep dropping in their egg production. And that second year is still pretty good, plenty good for a backyard chicken flock. But for a really consistent lay rate, you're not gonna wanna keep them longer than 1 season. But that's if you're really worried about the highest production possible. And then the other thing with that is that a lot of people, when they wanna get new chickens, they add in chickens. That does not work. You can do it, but it will affect the chickens that are already in that flock, and most likely it's gonna stress them and they're gonna drop down in their lay rate, and oftentimes they don't go back up. So what I would really recommend, whether you keep your chickens laying for a year or 2 years, rather than adding in chickens to your existing flock, just get rid of the old ones and get new ones in a completely separate batch. Make sure they have plenty of perch space, and that's around a foot per bird. And make sure that they have a nice dark place to lay their eggs. Chickens like privacy to lay their eggs. So we put curtains on the front of our nest boxes. Now this is debated by some, but I'll tell you in a second my argument against that debate. But one of the biggest things to keep them laying well during the winter is enough light. And that's hours of daylight. So for a chicken to lay well, they need around 14 hours of daylight. And they're gonna get that in the summer, but in the winter, your daylight hours are way less than that. And so we use supplemental lighting. Now the first tip to make things the easiest for you as a chicken keeper is having your lights on a timer. I used to have my lights on a switch, and I used to have to try to come out every morning at the same time to turn them on, come out every evening at the same time to turn them off. And that was really hard to get done. And if you're doing them on and off at different times of the day and you're throwing off their schedule, that's stress for them and they're not gonna lay as well. The reason that some people debate it is because they say that a chicken is born with like a certain amount of eggs they're gonna lay. So let's say they're gonna lay for a full 2 seasons after they start laying. What they're saying is that they might lay for 9 months and then they're gonna take like 3 months off or 6 months off during the winter when the daylight's down, but you're gonna be able to keep your chickens longer if you don't force them to lay during the winter. Okay, so maybe you get to keep your chickens longer, but why in the world would you want to keep your chickens longer just to feed them in between without getting any eggs out of them? To me, that makes no sense. And again, if you want chickens for pets and you're not worried so much about their egg production, by all means, keep your chickens longer. Don't make them later in the winter. But if you're worried about egg production, they're gonna need that supplemental light. Speaking of shorter days, it is getting dark, so I need to get this done. Happy chickens will lay the most eggs. That's one reason why I like the deep bedding so much, because it gives them something to scratch around in so that they're not bored. We also feed them some kitchen scraps so they have fun with that too, and they really like that. But for the most eggs possible, don't rely only on kitchen scraps or some kind of pretty grain mix that you come up with or something. For really good laying, you need a specially formulated layer feed. You can get it at your feed store or whatever. Just make sure you're getting an actual layer feed for your chickens. They need that nutrients to lay those eggs. I literally spend only about 5 minutes every day taking care of these chickens. The children do gather the eggs for me while I'm at work. They gather them around noon, so there's less time for them to get broken open and stuff, or when it's really cold for them to freeze. But I give them food and water in the morning while my cow is being milked, so it's really not even taking me any extra time because I'm waiting for the cow to get done with the milking anyways. But there's some things you've got to do if you want to have it that streamlined. First of all, have an easy feeder for them. If you've got a lot of little feed pans or feed troughs or something, I mean, sure, it works, but it's going to take you longer. This is a 30-pound hanging feeder. All I do is come in here, dump a bucket of feed in there, and I'm done. Then for the water, instead of coming in here every morning and taking these back outside to fill them up, I keep 2 extra waters out here. And then I can just fill it up right when I come down here and take it in along with the feed and get it done really fast. And speaking of which, something that's very important to make things faster, easier, and more efficient is having water in all the right places on your homestead. For several years, I would fill up buckets from a spigot on the outside of our house and carry them down here, take them out to the pasture when they're out on pasture. Such a pain. So much easier to have water right here. And I even have it going into a pipe that fills both of them up at the same time, and it's big enough so that it doesn't freeze like a hose does. And use nest pads in your nesting boxes instead of hay or straw. So much easier to deal with because you're not trying to fill these up with hay and straw every day because they get scratched out or something. And for rollout boxes, which is what I use, they roll to the front. It's necessary because if there was hay or straw in there, the eggs wouldn't roll to the front. But even when they're out on pasture in the summer, when they don't have the rollout nest boxes, I still use the pads because they're so much easier to deal with. If they get nasty, you can just shake them off, or at the very worst, you have to hose them off. And we want to spend as little time as possible doing the little annoying things and be able to spend more time enjoying the animals and being with our family and things like that. Hey man, I brought you a latte. You like it? Yeah, that's good. Okay, thanks. It came through this time. It's good. Another thing that we do to get the most eggs possible is we buy ready to lay pullets instead of raising chicks. We did that for several years and they just ended up not laying very well. We switched to getting ready to lay pullets and it has made such a big difference. The thing is that these pullets, as long as you get them from a good reputable place, they're raised in the right conditions with the right feeding program and everything so they can grow up to lay lots and lots of eggs. And honestly, I can't even raise them for the same prices that I can buy them for as ready to lay pullets. So it's not worth it for me with an egg business, but it might be worth it to you. They're a lot of fun to raise, but you gotta watch out for some common mistakes that people make. Hey, stop. Chicken's pecking my tripod. There's some common mistakes that people make when raising chicks that are easy to avoid, but they can really affect them for the rest of their laying life and they can even cause them to die. So you definitely wanna avoid those. I go over those mistakes in this video right here, so you're gonna wanna watch it next.